Penguin Random House Audio presents The Prime, Prepare and Repair Your Body for Spontaneous Weight Loss by Kulreet Chaudhary, MD, Integrative Neurologist, with Eve Adamson. This is the author, Dr. Kulreet Chaudhary. There is a PDF available to you as a reference guide which will contain many of the quizzes and recipes you will hear, as well as some information not in the recording. Please refer to it as often as you wish. Om Namo Narayani. What you eat becomes your mind. As is the food, so is your mind. Ayurvedic proverb. A note to readers. The material in this book is for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for the advice and care of your personal physician. As with all new diet and fitness regimens, this program should be followed only after first consulting with a doctor to make sure it's appropriate for your individual circumstances. Nutritional needs vary from person to person, depending on age, sex, health status, medication requirements, and total diet. Specifically, this program should not be followed by women who are pregnant or breastfeeding. The author and publisher expressly disclaim responsibility for any adverse effects that may result from the use or application of the information contained in this book. Part 1. Reverse Engineering Our Eating. Introduction. A Neurologist's Coming of Age. My grandfather was a doctor for a large community of people in a town near Ludhiana in India. I loved and admired my grandfather, and I knew from an early age that I would be a doctor just like him. After an interview I did recently, I had a revelation. I am now practicing medicine much the way my grandfather did, but it wasn't always that way. Life was much different in India in the 1970s than it is in the United States today. As the town doctor, my grandfather took his position as overseer of the community's health seriously. He created a partnership with the people of that community. When somebody got sick, he wasn't seeing the patient for the first time, in isolation, with no knowledge of his or her history or life. In most cases, he was also taking care of that sick person's parents, grandparents, and children. He understood how they lived. He created a loving bond with his community, and that bond allowed him to influence the entire family's health over the years. He didn't just provide a service, he provided a healing relationship. When I was young, I was the apple of my grandfather's eye. I was the first grandchild, and I was deeply attached to him. Up until I turned 4, he watched me during the day, and he took me into work with him regularly. I still have clear images of my grandfather in his little clinic, caring for the people who came. There was always such a tremendous feeling of love and support there. He could be stern when he needed to be because he was invested in his patients' health, and they didn't always do what he told them to do. But it always came from love. Sometimes people could pay him and sometimes they couldn't, but that was never an issue. This shaped my perception of what medical care should be more than anything else I ever learned in medical school. But then we moved to America. I was heartbroken to leave my grandfather, my extended family, and the community that nurtured me. But my parents were excited about the opportunities this new country would afford us. They wanted the American dream, and they thought a better life awaited them. People in India envision America as shiny and exciting and full of opportunity, but I still remember the feeling of losing my foundation. My parents, however, were eager to adapt. They moved my sister and me across the ocean and started a new life in Southern California. My mom was a physical therapist, and my dad an electrical engineer. Although my parents discarded some of our customs, for example, our fully integrated Indian family, including my parents, grandparents, uncles, and aunts, was now split across 2 continents, we still practiced Ayurvedic medicine. This wasn't a big deal to us. It was just part of our lifestyle. Even though my grandfather had been trained in Western medicine, our culture practices a complete integration of lifestyle medicine with Western healing. If someone was sick enough to require medication, the doctor would prescribe it. But typically the first step was, hey, you have to change these things about how you're living. The goal was never to keep them on medicine, as it seems to be these days in the United States. Once here, we continued to live that way, including in the way we ate. Of course, we were introduced to some American foods we hadn't tried before, but our basic eating style remained rooted in Indian cooking. The spices we cooked with on a daily basis, which are now considered part of Ayurvedic medicine, were simply a part of everyday cooking, including turmeric, cumin, coriander, fennel, ginger, and amla berry pickle. It sometimes still strikes me as strange to prescribe to my patients what I used to know as pickles on the dinner table. I didn't know at the time that as we ate these foods, we were fighting diabetes, cancer, and obesity. The way we dealt with minor health concerns was Ayurvedic in nature too, although I didn't know to call it that at the time. For instance, if I got an ear infection, my parents would break out the garlic oil, which was just sesame oil with garlic cloves soaking in it. If any of us got bronchitis, my parents would give us a mixture of turmeric and honey. These were the first lines of defense, before ever considering antibiotics. I didn't get a lot of antibiotics growing up because our home remedies were so effective. Another Ayurvedic concept we practiced was the portioning of our meals. Our lunches were really large and dinners really small, and we always finished eating before sunset. It was simply a part of our culture and what we were used to doing. I did notice some definite differences in the food between America and India. One of the most difficult was the milk. In India, the cows that are kept for milk production are treated kindly, like part of the family, and the milk tastes completely different. In India, milk tastes sweet. I used to love milk and butter in India, but I didn't like it so much here because it tasted bitter to me. It took me a long time to get used to it. I don't know if this is because of what the animals eat or how they're treated, but I do know that in India, the milk the cows give is voluntary, meaning they were not bred as dairy cows to give us milk. We had milk only when they happened to have given birth. Also, the relationship between humans and animals is gentle and compassionate. I grew up feeling that and experiencing a gentle and natural relationship with food itself. Yet we hardly ever had dessert. You might get some cake on your birthday, but other than that, fruit was the only dessert I knew. We craved fruit. And I remember how my father used to bring home boxfuls of mangoes. That was our dessert. I remember being 7 or 8, and we were allowed one sugary treat each week. It was always on a Friday, and it was usually one of those miniature candy bars, like you get on Halloween. Fridays were also when we were allowed 30 minutes of television. Woohoo! We enjoyed candy, but we didn't crave it because it seemed like such a rare event, and we didn't expect to be able to get it every day like kids so often do now. I still don't have strong sugar cravings, and I suspect this is because I never developed a neuroadaptation to sugar. I'll talk more about this later, but when dopamine is released, triggered by sugar, the pleasure that results often gets mentally associated with the desire to be nurtured. When you experience it at a young age, this makes for particularly deep psychological as well as biochemical impressions. Both can become challenges to overcome in adulthood. With this book, however, you have the tools to overcome them much more easily. I also learned something when I was 9 years old that is a fundamental part of Ayurvedic medicine: meditation. The loss of family support and community that we all experienced when we moved here took a toll on us. My mother went from raising 2 kids in a house with 8 other adults to raising 2 kids essentially by herself. When she developed a thyroid condition called Hashimoto's thyroiditis, she went to see an endocrinologist who told her the condition was related to the stress she was under. Even though he wasn't a meditator himself, he recommended transcendental meditation, TM, to her, and she embraced it. 6 months later, her thyroid condition was completely resolved, and her thyroid function was perfectly normal. She figured that if meditation was able to normalize her thyroid, it could certainly do wonderful things for kids. She sent us to a meditation teacher, someone I still remember with great fondness and whose presence always emanated such love, and my sister and I began to meditate too. At this young age, I had found an extremely effective method for bouncing back from daily stress. I'll talk more about this in the chapter on neuroadaptation, but stress has a huge influence on how well we process what we eat and how deeply neurochemical changes from food get rooted in our body. I believe that in addition to all
Sample complete. Ready to continue?